Hey, everybody. It has been a while since I've popped up here and done a video. It is mid-December and 'tis the season. I had a topic on my mind that I thought might be very helpful for some of you going through this. I'm sure everyone has. And maybe give you some tips and tricks that are going to help you learn how to level up with your musicianship, with your practicing and your performing. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the ego. When I say ego, I'm not necessarily referring to, egotistical. Ego is the way we perceive ourselves, and that plays into how we see our performances or how we view our musicianship, our practicing. We judge ourselves, and we should, but we need to do it in the right way. There are kind of two ends of this spectrum, and you probably will find yourself somewhere in the middle, maybe at one end or the other, where let's take the musician, the performer, who every time they play, every time they perform, they're critiquing themselves heavily. They are striving maybe for perfection and not attaining it. And so then everything they do is garbage. They really put themselves down. They think everything they do is terrible. And they kind of fall into that category. On the other end of that spectrum is the performer, the musician, who thinks everything they do is amazing and that there's no room for improvement. They're just out there winning all the time and there's nowhere to go. They fall into that, maybe into that word egotistical. But it all comes down to how we perceive ourselves and our ego. And there's a lot of nuance with that and a lot of, middle ground. You might find yourself on one end or the other, or have moved around that spectrum a little bit. So how do we attain a balanced perspective of our own performances and abilities? And why is this important? It's important because as a musician, we are constantly trying to raise the bar. We always want to be learning more. There's always room to grow. And to be at the peak of our game, we need to put the work in. But sometimes that's hard when we are either harshly judging ourselves or, on the other end, don't think there's anywhere else to go. We're already at the top of that bar. I am one of the opinion that that is not the case and that there's always room to grow. There's always more to learn, and we just have to keep searching for that to be able to find it. Now, first, I think in this process is we really need to hone in on our active listening skills. That's the very first place we need to start. We're musicians, we make sound, whether that be percussion, voice, guitar, bass, whether we're, a mixing engineer, we're creating, soundscapes, we're making sound. And so we really need to understand sound. We really need to be able to listen to things and really be able to identify the nuance that we're listening to. Now, a lot of you probably already have this skill to a certain degree, and maybe you don't even realize it. If you are listening to music and you're listening to your favorite artists, and it doesn't matter what genre that might be in. We could be talking about hip hop, country, jazz. We could be talking about metal, classical music. Chances are that you are listening and you recognize your favorite performers. You recognize whether you even know the song you're listening to. You didn't look at it it just popped up on a playlist. You're not looking at it. You start hearing it and you're like, wait, yeah, I think this is this artist. I recognize the sound of their voice. I recognize that style of songwriting. I recognize those drum fills, and you check yourself. You're able to kind of pick that out amongst artists. You immediately kind of can hear that. Now, if you haven't gotten to that level, that's the very first step. You might want to start really honing in and listening to those things. See if you can, kind of navigate that a little bit better. Beyond that, then we want to very much take the time to listen to, let's start with your favorite artists. let's start with artists that are at a high level. Maybe it doesn't have to be someone you're super familiar with, but then start really dialing in, listening to their style. If you're a guitar player, you really want to hone in and listen to their guitar tone. You want to listen to their style of riffing. You want to listen, maybe they've got, solos and they have a particular way or a flair about that they're playing. If you're a singer, you're listening to, the breath control, you're listening to the timbre of their voice, you're listening to their range, you're listening to the vocal delivery, you're listening to the diction. Really kind of dial into that and start making a little checklist and identifying what you're listening to. What do you like that you're hearing? What maybe are you hearing that you don't like? And just really practice at a high level, listening to the variety of the sounds that you're hearing. The more you do this, you may start discovering that you're hearing completely different things that you'd never really thought about before. That's the exciting part of it, is when you're starting to really kind of break it apart and you're like, I never even noticed that before. That is amazing. How do they do that? That's kind of the first step. And it's really an exploratory, kind of idea. And I mean, we're having fun with it. We already love these artists, so why not just go deep? Now, beyond that, the next step to this is you want to start kind of listening to artists that are not at that high level. You want to listen to some artists that are maybe at the amateur level. I mean, you can scroll TikTok all day long, your Instagram reels, and find artists who are not at that pinnacle. But start listening to them, even if it's not something that you really like. If they're maybe not that good. I mean, that's what the whole point of this is how to get good. So take the time, listen to what you're hearing and analyze it from a perspective of no emotion. We're not here to put people down. We're not here to talk trash. We're listening. We're practicing the skill of what's making this at an amateur level. Why? What is it that is putting it in this category as compared to this? So being able to identify very clearly why maybe this player's style is not where it needs to be yet. Now, for me, kind of the first time that I had to do this was as an adjunct. And I had to sit in and I had to grade juries. Juries are performance tests in college where you get up and you perform, for the faculty in a, dare I say it, very stressful setting. You've been working on this all, through that semester, and then basically you get up, they say, sing this, this, and this, and you sing it, and you're super stressed out, right? So I know the perspective of being the performer on the stage and being graded, and then getting those sheets back, because they're scribbling with their little pencils. They give you this sheet with their critiques on it, and usually it would have some things that were positive and some things that I needed to work on. Sometimes it was very useful information, and it helped me grow. Other times it was either ridiculous and I couldn't read it, or it didn't really make sense. It was some ambiguous something or other. It was almost like they didn't know what to say, and you don't want to be that person. So you have to take the time to kind of get yourself to where you're doing that. But I remember the first time that I sat in on juries, and I had to be the judge. I had to critique this. And I was a little scared because I wasn't sure I was going to, because you don't want to hurt people's feelings. At least I'm that kind of person that is a little bit more tender-hearted. And, so I made it a goal. I said, well, if I was in a lesson with this person and I was coaching them, how would I approach this? What are the things, because I have a very, this, and this. This is what we're going to work on. Here's how we're going to work on it. And I get excited about that when I'm coaching. That's one of the great things about it. So we take what's good, we take what's solid, and we give them positive feedback out the gates. We're like, I like this about your performance. And then when there is something that needs to be worked on, we say, I could see that you could improve this, or I would like to see, you get to this level. Here's some tips that I think will help you to do that. It's giving them something to work on. And that's kind of how you have to take that thought process and apply it when you're listening to these, lesser level artists. What are they doing? What are they doing well? And what do they need to work on? And how do they need to get there? As soon as you put yourself in the shoes of the person who's giving the advice, it opens up a whole new way of thinking about things. So how does that apply to what we're doing as musicians and getting ourselves to that level? Well, that is where we then do that same process with our own performances. We have to keep that balance between, the amateur side of things, the people that don't have the knowledge, that are still learning, the beginners, and the high level of the professionals. So even at a professional level, the professionals are still listening and they're still learning from their colleagues and they're still, their professors, and, the chain goes up. So there's always, like I said, somewhere to go. So the first thing you're going to do, you're going to record yourself. Now, you don't have to record yourself every day unless you already do, and that's great. Most of us are not that disciplined. So, record yourself maybe once a week. If you're super busy, maybe once a month. But record yourself in something that you're working on. Get a good maybe 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes of performance there. It can be recorded just a audio recording, or if you're feeling it, probably should go with the video recording, because it is good to see, some things like your posture, stage presence, and some of those other things. So record yourself. Don't watch it right away. You're going to give it a couple days. You can give it up to a week. You need to separate yourself from it emotionally. That is the goal here. We want no emotion when we go back and we set ourselves up to critique ourselves. We need to do it without the ego present. Got to get rid of that ego. So we set it aside. We come back to it. When we come back to it, we have a set of goals here. We're going to have little check boxes. What are we looking for? Maybe, some ideas, things that you should be listening for are going to be, is the tone consistent? Is the rhythm locked in? How's the stage presence if you're doing a video recording? If you're a singer, is there breathiness, or are you using, is there overproduction happening? How is the diction? The articulation of, the picking. Whatever it is in your field that you are working on, set yourself some very specific things that you want to be listening for. And then when you go into it, you're just educating. You're just judging a performance, and you're listening for that nuance, and you're making some notes. Be sure to write notes that you hear, things that are positive, things that you like about the performance. But make sure you also put in some things where you see improvement that needs to be made. No feels, just work. There's always time to have good feels about things later, and you should, look at your performances, and feel good about the things that you're doing. That's why we do what we do. But this process is separating those emotions from the work that needs to be done. We want to make sure that analysis is balanced, and that is the key to setting you up for continued improvement. I really hope this helps. Happy practicing and performing. I love you all. If you found any value in this video, I would love it if you would click the subscribe, the notification bell if you want to be notified when videos are coming out. Like I said, Vio and I are going to do a video coming up soon where we're going to talk about what we've been doing this year, some of the changes that have happened. There has been a lot more than just my hair color. And going into the new year, what's going on with Discord? What are we going to be doing? And I think you are going to be pleasantly surprised. Have a good one. Have a wonderful holiday. We'll probably be seeing you again here before too long. Love you all. Stay spooky, my friends.